Hi again everyone, welcome to video 2. In this video we're going to talk about some of the common barriers to time management and specific concrete strategies and solutions you can use to overcome them. So again, revisiting our learning modules, in the last video we talked about the benefits of using time management strategies, and here in this video we'll describe effective time management strategies. So first I want to start with a question: why do college students struggle with time management? So if this is something that's challenging for you, you're definitely not alone. And there are some common barriers that students identify that make it harder for them to use effective time management skills. And I meant to mention this earlier, but I would like to mention here that a lot of the material I'm using for these videos is based on resources that Sac State's Commit to Study has put together. This is a slide that they were kind enough to share with me, so I'd like to credit Commit to Study for their help with these videos and also their resources later in this module. If you want additional follow-up help or appointments with them, you can do that as well. So this slide is showing students' top barriers to effective time management. And as we can see here on the left, the number one barrier that students cite is procrastination, followed by overscheduling. Students often underestimate their time, so how long it will take them to do different things, neglecting to create a schedule, or misplaced priorities. So we're going to talk about all of those things in this video and then how you can take action, intentional action, to overcome those barriers. So barrier number one is procrastination, which is, as is shown in this image, thinking that, oh, I'll get to that the next day or I'll do it later, which again is very common, not only for students, but I think in life, people have commonly issues procrastinating. And so one of the solutions to tackle procrastination is to break larger items down into smaller specific tasks. So if you're just thinking about, okay, I have this big project to do, it can be very overwhelming. You're not really sure where to start, and that can commonly lead to procrastination if it's a big, hard thing that maybe causes you stress, but you don't really know how to get started. Breaking that down into these actionable, smaller, specific tasks can make it easier for you to get started and then ultimately finish that project. So as an example, say you have an assignment for one of your classes, either chemistry or biology. Here we'll use the example of a biology poster project. And so in order to break a big project down into more specific tasks, start by thinking about what the end goal is. So in this case, the end goal is completing that poster project, right? So we write that down and then we think about all the different steps it will take to complete that poster project. So things like picking a topic is the first thing we would have to do. We would have to research that topic, write a rough draft, have our writing peer reviewed, and then write a final draft. And here I'll emphasize the separation of the rough draft and the final draft with time in between for having feedback and peer review. That's really important. So those are our kind of subtasks, but then we can break that down even further, right? So research, for example, that's still kind of a vague item and you might not know exactly what to do for that, so we can break that down even further. So by that we mean read and annotate papers. For writing the rough draft, which is still a little bit vague, we can break that down more into, sorry again my face is blocking this, but I'll read it for us. So we can break it down into the different subsections we need to write: the conclusion, materials and procedures, data and results, and the introduction. So this is an example of how we can take a big project and break it down into actionable tasks that will help us prevent succumbing to procrastination. Another solution for procrastination is starting with tasks that you like. And this is beneficial for a couple of different reasons. This is shown on the slide. Again, this is shared kindly by Commit to Study. And the benefits for starting with something that you like are you'll actually complete a task. You'll get to check something off of your to-do list. That in turn will give you a rewarding dopamine release, which is going to be helpful. And it's going to build your momentum. So if you start with something you like, and sometimes it's just a matter of getting ourselves going. And then once we do, then we're ready to go and we're kind of in the zone and ready to tackle more things, right? So by starting with something you like, it can help us build momentum. Another common barrier that students face is overscheduling, which can then sometimes lead to multitasking. So it can be tempting when we have so many things to do. If we're scheduling too many things at once, then that can lead to us feeling like we have to be doing multiple things at once to get everything done. But this is something I like to talk about with my students. Multitasking actually is not a thing. Your brain can't do it. I mean, there are some exceptions if they're different neural pathways, listening and viewing, but you cannot focus your undivided attention on two different things at once. It'll just actually slow you down and you won't accomplish either thing as well. So overscheduling is a common barrier. How do we deal with that? One of the solutions is something called time boxing, which is something that I actually didn't learn about until a couple months ago, and it's been kind of mind-blowing for me. So I wanted to share it with you. So the idea of time boxing is instead of having a to-do list, which is what I used to always have before, and having this long to-do list, time boxing takes each of those items on our to-do list and puts them in a specific block of time on a specific day, so we know exactly when we are going to do that thing. And this has been really helpful for me, and also it helps with overscheduling because we can see, oh, I'm blocked off that time. I'm doing the rough draft for my methods of my bio poster. And so it can help us see how much time we actually have in our day and know that we can't schedule anything else for that time period. So this is something, I like this cartoon. I think it illustrates what we've been talking about so far very nicely. Here we have the chance of actually doing the thing and how concrete your plan is. So on the left here, we have someone saying, I will do the thing, which is very vague. There's no plan, so the chance of you actually completing it is rather low, right? But in contrast, on the right, we have this person saying, I will go to X at time Y and do Z. So that's something I haven't mentioned yet, but I think is also really important in terms of thinking about where you're actually going to do each of these things. So we talked about time boxing, when you were going to do the thing, and being specific about what you're actually going to do, but also thinking about intentionally where are you going to do these things, making sure it's a distraction-free zone. So for me, for example, it can be tempting to work from my couch, but that doesn't always put me in the most productive mindset, right? So going somewhere quiet with no distractions, a quiet study space, library, an office, sitting at a desk, that can be helpful. So we're being intentional about where we're doing things, when we're doing them, and also what we're doing. Another solution to overscheduling is practicing saying no to things, which is very challenging, I know, and again, something that I'm still working on myself. But to illustrate this is something I saw on Twitter a while ago where this person was saying they kind of formed an accountability group to help each other say no to things. And so, you know, they have sometimes frequent customer punch cards where you can get a free ice cream or something like that. This person made punch cards for their friends, and every time they said no to something, they would get to check something off. Once they got to 10 things, their friends had to buy them ice cream. And so this is, again, a strategy that I use myself and I'm practicing and I'm trying. Before I say yes or agree to anything, my default now is to say, okay, well, let me check my schedule and I'll get back to you. And so then checking that time boxing schedules you've looked at and see if you really have time for this extra thing. And if you don't, that's fine. And you can say, I'm sorry, I can't commit to that at this time. Another common barrier is unrealistic planning. So commonly students and people in general underestimate the amount of time it takes them to do different tasks. And so one solution for that is to add a 50% buffer. So again, this is based on studies. People commonly think it takes them less time than it actually will to complete each task. So especially when you're starting out, developing your time management skills, a good rule of thumb is to give yourself an extra 50% buffer of time. So what I mean by that is if you think that a task will take you an hour to do, budget an hour and a half initially in your schedule, and then you can gauge from there which one of those times is a more accurate estimate for how long it will actually take you to complete that task. Another solution for overscheduling is to give yourself a deadline buffer. So if you have an assignment that's due, say, on Friday, as shown here in this calendar, give yourself a personal deadline of the day before, and that way you have a little bit of wiggle room. If things do take you a little bit longer than you anticipated, you still have some time to get everything done that you need to. Another barrier is having a rigid, inflexible schedule. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we think that our progress is going to be this perfect straight line. And this would be what would happen if no challenging things came up, everything was perfect. But in reality, it never happens that way, right? We always have these challenges, which is fine. We can have things come up like maybe we get sick. Maybe we're not feeling very motivated or very mentally well that day, or we have family or personal emergencies. Those things happen, and that's fine. And so we can try to build in flexibility in our schedules to help us accommodate that. Like what we just talked about with the deadline buffer. If you give yourself an extra day, aiming to have the task done a day before it actually needs to be turned in, that gives you a little bit of buffer. Another solution I like for this is giving yourself flexibility blocks throughout the day. So as an example, say you have an exam scheduled from 2 to 3 p.m. on Thursday. You might give yourself some 30-minute flexibility blocks at the beginning and end of that time instead of scheduling yourself right up to that time, right? So if we think about by the time you finish an exam, you're going to be really drained, right? And you're not going to feel like doing anything right away. So you can give yourself some buffer time at the end to either reset mentally or something like that. So giving yourself these dedicated flexibility blocks throughout the day also gives you some wiggle room if you end up realizing there was a task you forgot to do, something like that. So these flexibility blocks can help with that. So in this video, we have now tackled this second learning objective, describing effective time management strategies. In the next video, we'll talk about how to use those concrete strategies to create a schedule.